I've covered this material before, but I want to have a concise explanation of the Tippit shooting, so I'm going to make this video. Now there are two documents which say that Tippit was pronounced dead at 1:15. This is the first one, a police report by Officer Davenport, and he says at 1:15 p.m. Dr. Richard LaQuarrie pronounced him dead. So 1:15 is the time that the doctor said he was dead. It's not the time that the doctor is estimating that he died. It's the time the doctor said he was dead. And then we have this other document, which is a permit for the autopsy. And it also says that he was declared dead at 1:15 p.m. So Tippit was at Methodist Hospital at 1:15 p.m. and the doctor said he was dead. There is a challenge to this time by Dale Myers, but this is the concise version, so I'm not going to deal with that bullshit. And then the next point is that the officer on 10th Street was still on 10th Street at 1:18. That's the time that the shooting was called in on the radio. So whatever time you want to say the officer was shot, he was still there at 1:18. That's when the ambulance picked him up. So, since Tippit was declared dead at the Methodist Hospital at 1:15, he could not have been the same officer that was shot on 10th Street at 1:15 to 1:17 and who was still there at 1:18. Tippit was shot earlier at a different location. And this is in Dealey Plaza, and I have circled in red what I take to be the puddle of blood that was seen there by Jerry Coley over on the right. Those two guys standing above the rest of the people there at the intersection of Main and Houston. One of them is Jerry Coley. I don't know which one it is. But he said, I looked down at the top of those steps, and he's talking about where the pergola is. Before you take the top step was a huge puddle that I thought was blood. Now there are people who challenge this, but once again, this is the concise version. So there's a puddle of blood in Dealey Plaza without a body associated with it. Next point, Alan Tippit was in Dealey Plaza. Alan Tippit was the son of J.D. Tippit, and he was standing very close to the presidential car when the first shot was fired. And this picture on the bottom from the I can't think of the name now, but it's a well-known, the Willis 5 photo, shows Alan Tippit standing right there just before JFK is shot. So J.D. Tippit's son was in Dealey Plaza. And J.D. Tippit and his son were together at home about an hour before the assassination. Alan Tippit just happened to get sick that day, he said, and he came home from school, and he was home when J.D. was there for his lunch, and this is according to the mother. So, J.D. Tippit, I say, gave his son a ride to Dealey Plaza. Therefore, J.D. Tippit was in Dealey Plaza, and it was his blood that was seen by Jerry Coley. Officer Tippit was shot in Dealey Plaza. Now, of course, I am speculating, technically speaking, that J.D. Tippit gave his son a ride to Dealey Plaza. But since they were together before the assassination, and his son was in Dealey Plaza, as I say, at the time of the assassination, then it's reasonable to think that his father gave him a ride. And if his father gave him a ride, he would also be in Dealey Plaza. Now, also in Dealey Plaza was this radio patrolman. This police officer, you can tell by the hat he wears, the blue hat, that he's a radio patrolman. And he's at the intersection of Main and Houston here. But according to the assignment sheets, only traffic officers had been assigned to this intersection. So a radio patrolman was in Dealey Plaza where only traffic division officers had been assigned, and R.C. Nelson is a radio patrolman. R.C. Nelson on the radio at this time said he was on the south end of south end of the Houston Street Viaduct, which happens to be where the Gloco gas station is. Now, this has been obscured in the transcripts by misattributing this transmission to 101 Patrolman Base, but there's no doubt about it, it's 87 R.C. Nelson who says this. And he says he's there at the same time that witnesses said they saw Tippit there. So what I say is that R.C. Nelson is driving Tippit's car, and the witnesses who thought they saw Tippit sitting in Tippit's car, dressing the same way Tippit does, was actually R.C. Nelson. So R.C. Nelson had taken Tippit's squad car from Dealey Plaza and is driving it in Oak Cliff. Now, Ambulance 602, according to the official story, picked up the officer on 10th Street at about 1:18. And both Ambulance 602 and R.C. Nelson clear at about the same time, within seconds of each other. Ambulance 602 has given Nelson a ride back to Dealey Plaza, I say, because Nelson says that's where he is when he clears. And I think this means that Nelson was the officer who was shot on 10th Street. Of course, he wasn't really shot, but they pretended that he was shot, they being the conspirators and R.C. Nelson and the ambulance driver. Ambulance 602 picked up R.C. Nelson on 10th Street and brought him to Dealey Plaza, where R.C. Nelson had left his squad car when he took J.D. Tippit's squad car earlier. Now, Clayton Butler, according to the official story, drove Ambulance 602, the ambulance that picked up the officer on 10th Street. But Butler told the HSCA that he drove Ambulance 601. And Butler, I won't read this here, but Butler doesn't seem to know in 1978 where Tippit was shot on 10th Street. He thinks it's on one end of the street when it was on the other. And here, Clayton Butler, once again in 1978, says that he did something on 10th Street which Ted Calloway claimed in 1964 that he had done. That is putting Tippit's pistol on the hood of the squad car. So I think this once again demonstrates that Clayton Butler was not really driving Ambulance 602. He's just pretending that he was, and he's giving this detail to prove that he was there without realizing that Ted Calloway had already said that he did that. So Clayton Butler, in Ambulance 601, delivered Tippit's body to Methodist Hospital a little too early for the shooting on 10th Street to have been the shooting of J.D. Tippit. And that's my concise explanation. I have videos on the Tippit shooting. I have 8 of them. And that's the less concise explanation.